back to another great episode of Security Halt Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Danny Caballero, and today I have the pleasure of bringing you a amazing doctor and, we can't, honorary jarhead and,
Yeah,
and
I'll
naval
take that.
doctor,
Love it.
Dr. Donnelly Wilkes. Doc, thank you for being here.
Denny. Yeah, glad to do it. Nice to meet you virtually and all that good stuff.
Likewise. Yeah, when I look for stories, when I look for individuals, and I have to give a shout out to Dr. Mark Gordon, amazing provider, an unsung hero to soft war fighters that are coming back and dealing with so many issues, but he's also a great connector and he put us in contact. So Dr. Gordon,
That's
thank
right.
you so much again for bringing more amazing people. But being introduced to you and immediately going to read your book, Code Red, Fallujah, I realized this is a story that needs to be told, that needs to be shared, because when we think of docs in the grunt sense, it's always the corpsman, it's always the 18 Delta, it's always your doc, your combat medic, who we think is like, oh, doc will take care of everything. But we're such young kids in Iraq, uh, and we think these guys are like PhDs or doctors. Like, no, dude, they're running around doing the best they can, and we just
That's
assume
right.
we bring everything up to doc. But here we are, and I'm reading your book, and like, no, this is a doctor. This is a young doctor, and the thing that blows my mind, it's like, just like that young combat medic, this doctor is fresh out of years of training, years of medical school. And instead of being like, hey, you're going to do your clinical work here, you're going to start working here, like start being incorporated. And of course, medicine is medicine. It's important everywhere you go, but you're going straight to Fallujah.
That's right. Surprise.
So please tell us about this remarkable story that needs to be told and shared.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's good insight, because you're right. It's just not the typical path. And of course, in peacetime, um, even military medical training follows the traditional path of most other physicians. But when war breaks out, everything changes, as we know. And so it's just not very common, that physicians, even military physicians, end up in combat situations. And when we look back, gosh, now 20 years ago, the Battle of Fallujah was the biggest and most violent battle of the entire Iraq War. And there was just a handful of us who found ourselves in a unique position of being forward with infantry battalions. And my battalion, 1-5, 1st Battalion, 5th Marines out of Pendleton, just happened to get the call. And that was when General Mattis was, the um, commanding officer for 1 MEF, 1st Marine Expeditionary Forces. And he was kind enough to endorse my book. And I found myself just outside the walls of Fallujah providing field medical care. And there's, a little bit of a story of how I ended up there, but it definitely was a good Lord, how did I end up here moment in my life as a young physician.
Well, take us back. How did you get involved in medicine? What was the thought process as a young kid? Because it's like the top tier things. Like you, astronaut, cowboy, firefighter, marine or soldier, and doctor. It's up there. Like, how did that work?
Yeah.
Tell us about the humble background, how it started.
Yeah. Thank you. I had a pretty, I think, typical childhood. I grew up in Northern California, small town in the foothills of the Sierra Nevadas, playing sports and water skiing and hiking and hunting and things like that. My father was a contractor and then later in life a sheriff. I had 4 brothers, so there's 5 of us total, including a twin brother. And me and my twin brother were the oldest. And I think after getting beat up on my dad's job sites doing construction, I decided I wanted to use my body and my mind for other purposes. So kind of hit the books and never looked back. And then in high school, I decided I wanted to try to take it as far as I could. Had some talks with Dad, and said, "Well, just go for medicine." I said, "Dad, that's really hard, and a lot of school and all that." And he just looked at me and was like, "So I know you can do it," type thing, and gave me the spirit I needed. And so just from there forward, set my sights on medicine and never looked back. And I had some bumps in the road on getting into medical school. It's obviously very challenging anywhere in the United States, to be honest. But I started looking at Tulane out in New Orleans, and they just have a wonderful history of medicine there. One of the oldest training medical schools and hospitals in the history of the United States. Charity is there, but it was damaged in the flood. Anyways, the dean of the school really valued military medical students, and in each class, on average, there's maybe 10 military medical students who might join an incoming medical school class. Those students have some form of scholarship, uh, and mine was the Navy Health Profession Scholarship Program. So I applied for that Navy scholarship. I was accepted, and then when you are granted that scholarship, at that time they would pay for any medical school in the United States that you were accepted to. So I was accepted to Tulane. I knew I had a ticket for the Navy to pay for it, and I took it. And from there forward, you sign, you are commissioned as an ensign. And day one of medical school, you are, commissioned, but you only serve active duty for a month each year during medical school. So 1 month you go out and do some training while everybody else is taking a break. And then when you graduate medical school, you are instantly bumped up to an O3. So I was a lieutenant. And it's funny, you step aside, everybody's graduating over in the big hall. The Navy and other military students step aside into a little room. They are given the oath of office and salute an officer right there. And that's the time where you know that your path is going to be a little bit different than all the other doctors.
Yeah. And it's insane when you think about it. And there's a lot of different career options out there that kind of mimic that. Like, you can come in the military, be and instantly become an officer, but as a doctor, like, now you're in charge of the health and well-being of troops in combat. And it's like it's from, you're already in a position in a career field that is so stressful. Amplify that by 1,000, and now you have to deploy, be in combat, and care for others, and take on all the responsibilities that come with being a health provider. That is not an easy task. A lot of us, we get years of formative training, and we are allowed to grow into our leadership roles. You don't get that. You are instantly thrust, and it's like, how do you get that experience and then immediately have to say, okay, now I have to perform the duties of an O3? Like, oh cow, man. And people don't understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're right. And the other part that escalated the whole situation was that my fourth year of medical school was 9/11 for me. So I was a fourth year, September 9/11. And instantly, of course, that I knew that was going to change my military path. And so after medical school, everybody goes to residency, and because you're just a baby doctor out of med school. And even in residency, the training is the learning curve is so steep. You just need years of experience to fully become a seasoned physician. So I'm in residency at the hospital at Camp Pendleton, Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton, also down at the Naval Hospital in San Diego. And the war in Iraq is kicking off. Things are escalating. Things aren't going well in the Al Anbar province. And in military medicine, they can pluck you from residency and send you to active duty. And this does not happen in any other residency training program in the United States. You have to complete your residency training to practice independently, but not in the military. And they've since changed this rule, by the way. But at that time, they could pluck you right out, which they did for me, and send you either blue side or green side. I went green side with the Marines, and in my case, that was an infantry battalion, and we deployed within 6 months. So within less than a year of graduating from med school, I found myself embedded within the infantry battalion and off to Iraq. So that was wild.
That is insane. That is absolutely insane. The progression that you went through in that short period of time. And to take it to break it down for people to understand this, to be infantry is one thing, to be Marine infantry is completely different. And then to be a doctor that's going to be integrated within a Marine infantry battalion, that is not easy. That is not an easy
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, they speak their own language, as you know, and it's its own culture. And of course, they were glad to have me, but I truly understood that I was joining this elite group of guys who had their own traditions and had been through their own very rigorous training. Everyone from the kid out of high school is only 18 to seasoned, Marine Corps officers. But I have to say, they welcomed me, and it's a band of brothers like it always is, especially when you head off to a foreign world and the S hits the fan. You all you have is that guy next to you, and I appreciated how they welcomed me into their brotherhood.
Absolutely. So now, newly minted Doc Wilkes
That's right.
is in Iraq. What was that? What was that like? That first night, that first, like, oh shit, this is really happening. I am
Yeah,
here.
yeah. It was like the Wild West. That's really how it felt initially. And the story I tell of the oh shit, here I am, and this is real, was we flew into Kuwait. The whole battalion assembled in Kuwait, and then at that time, we were, instead of flying up into Baghdad, we convoyed. So the whole battalion assembled in roughly 50 to 75 vehicles. And for 3 days, we convoyed right up into the heart of Iraq. And I think it was, 24 hours in, we're snaking along in the middle of the night. It's just jet black outside. And I sneak up into the cab. My corpsman's driving. And I look out on the horizon, and all I can see are these flickering candles out on the horizon. And I realized those are the oil rigs that Saddam had lit on fire, still burning. And just a couple of weeks ago, I was watching that on CNN, and here I am driving towards it. And I just was thinking, oh man, how'd I get myself into this?
Absolutely. That's one of the, I mean, that's imagery that we see all the time. It's
Yeah,
it's still on, I think, Newsweek. Everybody covered that imagery.
yeah,
But being there in person, seeing that, like, I can't imagine that. I was a kid, and I remember seeing, like, Jesus, like, you're just as a kid in America, you're disconnected. But even at that point, I was like, man, like, there's no shit. This is combat. This is what people are going to be facing. And
yeah.
when you started hearing about Fallujah in 2004, even stateside, you were like, it was clear understanding that this was a down and out brawl, a street fight. This was not
That's
a
right.
situation where you're calling airstrikes and you're sitting from afar. Uh, the men, the units that were in that firefight, in those prolonged engagements, that was encountering the enemy and fighting toe to toe.
Yeah, that's
What
right.
was
It
that?
was.
What was that like for you?
Yeah, so just a real quick summary, and of course this is all in the book, but we get to our forward operating base, which at that time was called Camp Mercury, just a short distance outside Fallujah in the Al Anbar province. We took over for the army at that time. The Marines were called in because things weren't going well, and so basically the Marines were called in to try to clean up the mess and stabilize things. So Fallujah is just a hot mess. Mattis decides we're going to attack. That happens within just a week or two of us getting there. I think we got there in March, and Fallujah, the battle began around April 4th, 2004. So we leave Camp Mercury. We, our battalion and one other initially, we roll out. The stage is set. The attack begins. I'm set up um, I'm just going to call it a few hundred yards from the front lines or the outskirts of Fallujah. I can see the city right there, and I'm under a freeway overpass, and that's where we set up our battalion aid station. And that term battalion aid station, it's a little bit more grand than it sounds. We were just behind some dirt barriers off the side of the road.
Yep.
When we set up some litter stands. There was no hardened structures, but we did have the protection of one of the freeway overpasses above us in part, and that's it. We lived there. We had some Marines post up to provide some protection, and we from that position, we just lived there for the weeks that the battle went on. I would rotate out with there was one other doctor in the battalion with me, Cormac O'Connor, and we would rotate out every few days as the battle surged. The wounded men were brought directly to us, and I could hear the battle, see it. Cobra attack helicopters are flying over, tanks are rolling through because our position there was the main artery into Fallujah. Marines are coming in and out, um, and they would bring them to us by Humvee, the wounded men, and then we would stabilize, treat. If there were minor wounds, we could get them back in the fight. If they were more major, and we certainly saw it all, we would medevac them out either by a Humvee convoy or a helicopter. And that was what we did day to day. And just to tell you the craziness of that situation, we were close enough, and they, the insurgents, the bad guys, they knew we were there. It was no surprise. They'd lob in mortars, hit pretty darn close. One day, the fighting was intense, and we had just treated some wounded men. And I was walking back to my ambulance, and a rocket came in, and just a direct strike right in the corner of the overpass, knocked us all down. The fumes and the fury of the rockets blast kind of wafted through. It was just unreal. I could never describe what that was like to be in proximity of a rocket like that. But that was what we encountered there. There was no bullets coming through, but the mortars and rockets, man, that was something I'll never forget.
Oh yeah, no, you can't forget that being targeted with uh small arms,
Yeah,
that's impactful. But
yeah,
when you're taking a mortar strike or an RPG, like that's different. That's unsettling. Like just hearing a mortar round incoming and not you don't have any way of detecting or understanding where it's coming. You hear that
that's right.
and it's just gut wrenching. It's like it's going. I can hear it. It's going to fall somewhere, and for it. We can laugh now. We can laugh at
Yeah,
the idea of like the panic and it's like, fuck, man, run for something. And uh, but there's hopelessness. There's a complete hopelessness of like, man, like either I get the cover or I don't. Either I get somewhere where it's not going to hit me dead on. Like it's one of the true moments in combat where you're like, fuck it, dog. Like I can hear this fucking thing coming, but I don't know where it's gonna hit. And as soon as it's over, it's like, oh, till you hear that other round that was just hung and it's coming down towards you. It's like, motherfuck. Like, dude, it's the
again.
worst. It's the worst adrenaline rush and spike on earth. Um, but man, and to experience it as a doc, and we know that corpsmen, we know that our combat medics, we know our 18 deltas, they're supposed to be in the fight. What you don't want is your surgical team. What you don't want is your doctors to be in the fight. But in 2004 in Fallujah, I don't think anybody was outside of the fight. It was everywhere.
Yeah, it was. And I know now that the military commanders were just learning as they went. There wasn't necessarily this is the battle plan for the Battle of Fallujah, because we hadn't done this for a long time, done
Yep.
this close quarters urban combat. So they were figuring it out. There was a time, when there was talk, and I was involved with the strategic planning of where we'd set up our aid station. There was a time when the battalion commander was talking about us being mobile, and going to the site of wounded men, like in Fallujah or right on the outskirts or things like that. And I, quickly said, "Sir, that's not a good plan. We gotta be stationary. We need to have a casualty collection point where the wounded men are brought to us. Your corpsmen can handle those field situations, stabilize. That's what they're trained to do, and bring them to us." And after a little conversation, he decided that's a good idea, Doc. Let's put you at a stationary battalion aid station. So we were figuring it out as we went. And to your point, I remember thinking to myself, wow, this is it. This is the plan, for me and Cormac, the two battalion surgeons. I wish there was a little more thought put into this, but that's war. And I came to understood there's just things that weren't known, and we had to figure it out as we went.
And the thing that people don't realize is that's war all the time. Even as
Yeah,
a special forces guy, that bread and butter for a special forces team is being able to plan out their missions. We don't have somebody else planning stuff out. Like, you are a 12-man ODA, you're going to plan your mission, you got to plan everything out. And I remember, even in my last combat trip, hearing other higher ideas of what we should do with uh docs, like our surgical teams, and the idea that they wanted to do the mobile teams. Like, yeah, well, you know what, we'll deploy you and you guys will have this medical ass. I'm like, all right, first of all, we are going into a very, very kinetic environment. Do you really want us to take this doctor, the nurses, the anesthesiologists, and all of their kit to come with us? And it's like, when you explain to them and overlay it against like the impossible terrain and like the templated enemy, people are finally like,
that's right.
you're right, we shouldn't do that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Because if that dude gets killed, I can't do his job. None of my guys can do his job. Medical doctors can't be replaced easily in the battlefield. They just can't. We can't multiply them.
Yeah,
We can always make a new detachment commander. We can always find a team sergeant. We can always find a gunner, but we can't find another you. And the fact that there was only two of you out there, that's just stressful reading it in the present moment.
yeah,
How are you
yeah.
guys able to manage that chaos? Just two of you.
Yeah, we were good friends all the way from medical school in Tulane. We had studied together and lived together, and then just happened to get the same residency program and end up in the same battalion. So we had that history, and that served us well. And as training physicians, even in residency, you're used to being able to pick up the phone and call the attending and get a consultation. All that goes out the door, of course, once you're deployed on the other side of the world. So it's just you and your corpsmen, and of course, some of them were really helpful. Some of those senior corpsmen really had some of that field mentality and know-how that helped me a lot. But in the end, I described it like you'd access this file drawer of this training that you had, and military physicians do go to some higher level field combat medical training. So, that was out in Texas and at USC County Hospital. And I was trained how to do surgical airways and chest tubes and things like that. And thank God I paid attention, because I had to use it. And you just don't expect it. It's very rare that you end up doing these things in a combat environment, but we did. And man, when it's an uncontrolled environment, unlike an emergency room or a hospital setting, when you're in the field on the ground in the dirt and you're wearing your flak jacket in the dust and mortars are dropping in the background, it's just surreal. And I was prepared, and I think I leaned on my training, and that served me well. But nothing can truly prepare you for what that's going to be like until you're in it.
Yeah.
It's like getting married or having a kid. You got to go through it to really understand the fallout.
It might be a little more stressful.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's when it comes to medical training, when it comes to like, even at our level, at the guy on the ground, the non-doctor, everything from simulated patients to going through stressful training, it doesn't really come close to seeing a real medical emergency in the situation. When you're dealing with
Yeah.
a friend that is shot, when you're dealing with a non-combatant that's injured, like it is one of the few things that, while it's good to train and it's absolutely critical that we maintain these skill sets and maintain these opportunities, whether it's life patient models or the super realistic mannequins, you cannot replicate a human being that is hurt, that is looking for care. You can't. And it immediately just puts you in a different mindset. Um, what was that? If you had to think of like that first oh shit moment of like, okay, this is it. I'm a doctor and this is my job. Like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, it was, it was simply that, hey, I'm meant to be here one way or another. I may not understand it. I may not even like it at some points, but I'm supposed to be here. This is, and for me, in the end, this is just where the good Lord wanted me. And I had to, I think, reconcile with that, because there were definitely times where I was very, in the book, kind of honest and forthcoming with the fact that I signed up for it. I love medicine and being a physician. I love wearing the uniform. Love being a Navy officer. I think my upbringing brought me to that point of wanting to join the military and serve my country and all those things. But there was a part of me that wanted to have my cake and eat it too, if I was being honest, right? I wanted the glory and maybe even some of the guts and glory part of it, but I wanted to come home in one piece, and I didn't expect the gravity, the weight, the intensity, the emotions of what I was experiencing. Bottom line is, I didn't expect to be in Fallujah, and who could have, right?
Yeah.
9/11, the world, all of it, and then get thrust into this infantry battalion that happened to go to the worst war of the entire 10 years. It was all so surreal and so unexpected that it took me off guard. So in the end of that, though, because of how odd it was and just happenstance, I had to know that I was needed there. And so I made peace with that. And I described that in the book, that it was kind of a night in Fallujah where I truly just got on my knees on the gravel of my ambulance floor and said, all right, help me figure this out. And something clicked, something released, where I just knew the things out of my control. I had to believe that they were truly out of my control and give those things up, because there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
And once I did that, this weight kind of came off my shoulder and I was able to focus and concentrate and just do my job, come life or death. And that gave me a peace and a focus and a clarity that I maybe hadn't had up until that point in the deployment. So that's how I got through that.
After that defining moment, when you kicked into that gear, how did it go for you? After you made
Better,
that conscious effort to give
better.
that up and that control.
It was, I'm not going to tell you it was rosy and easy sailing, but physically and mentally, it was a true light switch, because taking this weight off of the thing. I was trying to steer the ship, right?
Yep.
Wanted to steer the ship, and had to believe and live the fact that it wasn't at the helm. It wasn't my job. It wasn't, for me to necessarily steer the ship. But what I could do is access those skills, the training, find comfort with the men I was with, and just kind of be present. Be present, even though this place, I hated it, and every day came for me was, if I can get through this day and do my job well, then I earn the right at some point here one of these days to go home, and I want to earn that right to go home. And so that was my focus, just to
Yeah.
do my job and be the best that I could each day so I could earn that right, just like every other guy there, and we could all go home together. And that really helped me. So a
Uh,
lot better once I accepted it.
and that's something that spirit factor. We always talk on the show, mind, body, spirit. Everything has to be
Yeah.
in balance, even when we don't know about it. Like I was ignorant for many years. Many of my friends were. Many of us that only saw our life as being like this. I just want to be the
Mm-hmm.
best at this. It's the only thing I want to be. Well, I got to control everything. So, no, you can't. Mind, body, spirit. We neglect all three for so long, or maybe we only work on the body. We just work out, work out.
Yeah.
But the spirit, man, the spirit of being able to say, you know what, there's something bigger out there. I can't control this. At my worst, in my moments of deep despair, because I felt like if I made a bad call, if I planned something wrong, somebody was going to die. My anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
the feeling of, I mean, having mental breakdowns behind closed doors because you're just done. You're physically, mentally just done. And
Yeah.
it's every time you're rolling the dice, is like, am I going to choose or do or say, like, how are my choices in this planning? And if I don't advocate for this, will it lead to somebody dying? If I don't open my mouth and say something as a leader within this team, will somebody inevitably pass? And it's like, I don't have the control. I don't. I can do the best job I can. I can do the absolute best thing, but I have to give up some control. I have to be able to say, you know what? I believe in God. I believe in a higher power. I have to give away this control, or
That's
I'm
right.
going to fall apart. And I had
That's
the
right.
same moment of reckoning, and it wasn't this big thing of having to sit down and because even at that point I wasn't completely back into my faith, but I was within my faith enough that I could understand that maybe I'm not right with God right now in this moment, but right now I'm choosing to say like, hey, I'm going to do the best I can. And I got to stop trying to control everything because you can't.
Yes.
You
That's
don't
right.
have that power, man. You have enough power within yourself to let go. And that's it. And be able to say, you know what? I'm going to continue doing my job to the best that I can. And if something happens, I know I got 12 dudes here with me that can fucking help me out. And I know that I'm going to be okay. No matter what, I'm going to be okay.
That's right. Because we were made imperfect and got, that's that we were put on this earth not to be perfect. We were put on here to the earth to fail and understand that that's part of the journey,
Yeah,
and that there's always a way back to good Lord. And I made mistakes, and so did every single person out there. But that's part of getting back up and moving forward, knowing that you did your best and you're forgiven.
yeah,
And that was that was therapeutic, knowing that.
absolutely. It's almost like you're literally taking off some of the weight that you're carrying and you're giving it to a higher power to say, hey, I can't do this anymore. And it's remarkable when I talk back with or reach out and talk with some of my friends from the last deployments I did, and they all share the same experience. Like, dude, in every moment we were together, it was just optimism, happy. We were all together, but in private moments, I was having breakdowns. I was having moments of
Yeah,
just sheer, like, just not able to take on this weight anymore. And everybody says the same thing. And I just finally had to say, like, I can't control this. I can't control it. I can't affect it. I gotta let it go. And there's always stories of
right.
people that weren't able to do that. And maybe they sought out um, other things, maladaptive coping
Hmm.
devices. But
Hmm.
I am blown away at the amount of people within special forces, within combat arms that said, you know what, like when things got tough, when things got absolutely miserable and I couldn't take it anymore, I just had to take a knee and give that power up to somebody. And that somebody higher was there. And it's just like, okay,
That's right.
they don't have the control. And that's a beautiful thing. Do you find yourself now as still a provider, still a healer? Do you still have those moments of having to remind yourself of saying like, hey, like I can't save everybody. I can't do the impossible.
Yes, and I think I'm more conscious of it now than I ever was. Sometimes I'll even take a moment to remind myself of that on purpose, just to sit down after maybe a hard day where I know maybe some of my patients, didn't feel like they got 100% out of me, and I'll have to remind myself that that's okay because I'm not going to be the perfect person for everyone every time. And if I expected that, then I'll just get burnt out and I won't be able to practice medicine.
Yeah.
is the truth. So there's self-preservation, I guess is what I'm saying, and involved in my life. And so I'm better about, taking time to exercise in the morning, get my body set up, get my mind set up. Um, maybe pray or take some meditation moments more so than I ever used to in the past to you know get my spiritual self in shape before I
Yeah.
go out there in the world. So doing those things, giving myself that grace, really is something that I'm more mindful of these days, and it helps me be a better doctor and husband and father and all of it.
Yeah. It's, I think the truth is finally coming out to so many of us. Um, all of us that have been tried and tested in combat, that have deployed and seen the absolute worst. A lot of us are starting to finally come awake and understand that there is such a thing as taking care of yourself. And just taking care of yourself doesn't mean just working out. It means taking care of the spiritual, taking care of the
That's
family,
right.
being able to pour back into yourself. And man, while it would have been helpful if we would have known this in those earlier years of deployment,
Yeah.
there is a beauty of understanding the importance of it now and being able to advocate to people to say, like, hey, explore not just your physical fitness, your spiritual fitness, mind, body, and spirit. You got to take care of it all, especially after you've given so much of your life in service to the nation and service to others. And it's beautiful to see individuals such as yourself being willing to say, like, yeah, look, I'm a high functioning medical doctor, and I have to take time out of my day to take care of my body, to pour back into my relationships, to meditate, to pray, to be involved in being a human being, not just what I do for a living.
Yeah, and be vulnerable. In the military and a lot of different environments, being vulnerable, historically wasn't okay
Yep.
because you were maybe, thought it was a little bit less or weak or things like that. I think that the military is doing a better job at being vocal about the challenges that military life brings, what it takes to reacclimate into civilian life. I know that just in my 7 years of active duty, I was even tasked at giving briefs and having conversations with my battalion about combat stress and reacclimating and those kind of things. I know you talk a lot about this on your show and working with vets and things like that. So I wanted to, comment on the fact that I think more awareness is being given to it. I know that the medical care and the mental health care is continuing to get better. I'm trying to still work with veterans, and we can talk a little bit about that. Veterans and of course civilians in the mental health realm and providing novel therapies for depression and PTSD and OCD and other mental health disorders. So I'm glad is the bottom line that people are saying, yes, you can be more vulnerable and there are avenues to recovery more so than there ever has been in the past.
Absolutely. One of the greatest things I ever discovered is a amazing mental health care provider, author, mental health advocate, Brene Brown. And it's one of the things where, you can fill up your bookshelf with nothing but On Combat and Sebastian Junger's Tribe and all these great memoirs about combat in itself. But go out of your way to look for amazing authors that are talking about amazing ways to heal yourself that may seem like soft skills, but to the warrior, are just as vital as learning how to shoot, move, and communicate. Emotional
Mhm.
intelligence makes you a better friggin' operator. Emotional intelligence
Yeah.
makes you a better husband, a better friend, a more capable and robust combat warrior. It makes you a better person. Here's why. Emotional intelligence isn't weakness. It's knowing that you can go into a situation and be calm, cool, and collective and understand that, like, okay, I'm going to combat. I'm going to deploy. I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to experience these emotions. I am not my emotions. I am not my thoughts. I can allow myself to say, man, today was really difficult. Let's debrief. Hey, you okay? You good? Take a deep breath. We're going to be all right. This is our mission. This is our job. But at the end of the day, we got to make sure we're good. Being the guy that says that emotions aren't useful, that's not a good operator. That's not a good combat soldier. That's somebody that needs a lot of work, a lot of healing. And that was me. And arguably, it didn't make me a better leader. The things that made me a better leader was understanding that you need to be calm, cool, collected. You need to not be the guy that's always yelling, that's always upregulated. You're always upregulated. You're just reacting. You're not responding, dog. You're not doing anything helping. You're you're not doing anything of worth. You're adding to the problem. Be willing to learn all these amazing concepts. It's simply reading about self-compassion, simply reading about vulnerability, like being emotionally intelligent. There's a great thing I always like to bring out to people called the feelings wheel. And everybody's like, oh my God, like, I don't want to read this thing. It's all multicolored and girly. I'm like, yeah, read it. Every time you react to anger, go there, follow anger, and look at all the different things it could be. It's going to make you a better
Mhm.
person because then you realize that it's not just anger. You're upset because you feel let down. You're upset because you're feeling like you're not valid. You're not being validated in your work. Be willing to understand your
Yes.
emotions. Nobody wants to talk about it when you're in a team room. But man, if we could spread that concept, we could talk about it a lot more amongst not only our military elite, but amongst just everyday soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors. Everybody needs to understand that it's okay to have an understanding of your emotions.
Yeah, I love all that, and as guys, being able to have these conversations more and more is, I think, paramount because women thrive on emotions,
Yeah.
and they have their tribes, and they get together, and they can hash it out, right? And they're
Yeah.
really good at that and creating community just amongst girlfriends. And guys aren't so good at that. So
Yeah.
tapping into all these things that you're talking about, it
Yeah.
helps.
It's so true. I find myself always reaching out to guys. I'm like, hey man, you haven't reached out. You haven't stopped by the peer to peer support group, just checking, making sure you're good. It's like, no, I'm not doing good. Why don't you reach out? I don't want to bother somebody. You're not bothering
Right.
anybody. In fact, if this is you, you're going through a hard time and you start to isolate, stop. Reach out to your friends. You know who they are. You know the people that you love. You know the people you care about. They want to hear from you. They want you to
That's
reach out
right.
when you're having a hard time. When everything in your body is telling you not to talk, that's when you should talk. That's when you should reach out
Yeah,
and say, having a rough day. And your friends will be glad you called.
that's 100%. So Denny, you and I touched a little bit about a little bit on some of the work I'm doing in my practice currently with mental health
Yes,
conditions, and if you'd
please.
like, I can jump into some of that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Uh, so I practice here in Thousand Oaks. I have a primary care medical practice. I do a lot of sports medicine and things like that. Um, I certainly have the gamut of patients from very young to very old and in between. Some first responders, firefighters, policemen, things like that. Some veterans, and so a snapshot of the mental health, crisis in the United States is just that it is just escalating as far as the number and frequency and severity of mental health related conditions, whether it's depression, anxiety, OCD, or PTSD. And the weapons we've had historically just haven't been that great. And what I'm referring to is number one, just access to mental health care, whether it be therapy or providers. Number two, medications. And of course, when we're treating mental health conditions, we don't just jump to medications. There's certainly a lot of other tools and weapons, lifestyle changes, and things that can really make a big difference, including just exercise and meditation.
Yep.
Good studies show that exercise and the neurotransmitters that are released are as good as medication in many instances. So never forget that. But when we talk about medications and look back historically at how well they work, it's not great. Roughly only 25% to maybe a max of 40% of patients have a meaningful benefit from prescription antidepressant medications across the category of different types. And there are many. So in the last decade, there's been a lot of off the um, off the books dabbling, so to speak, or experimentation with psychedelics. And I think a lot of us have heard of these things like microdosing with mushrooms and psilocybin and anesthetic agents and things like that. And then, fortunately, because of some anecdotal, hey, this might work, clinical trials have been uh, put in place and have been carried out to the full extent of being able to analyze the data on a few different agents, and there's been some positive benefit. The main one I'm referring to currently is ketamine therapy, and historically it's been given intravenously, and then also sublingual, and then in 2019, an intranasal form of ketamine called S-ketamine with the brand name Spravato was FDA approved. And it was FDA approved because in longitudinal studies, they saw that when they analyzed mental health scoring systems on assessing was there a benefit for patients who maintained treatment, there was meaningful benefit and in some cases recovery for a significant number of patients who had what we would call treatment resistant depression. And that definition simply is a patient who has failed to or inadequately responded to two or more antidepressants. Two or more antidepressants. That's treatment resistant depression. And there's just a huge bank of people who fit that category who just simply did not do well with the traditional antidepressant medications. Now, it's not a magic pill, of course, and things like that, but it certainly provides hope in an avenue for a spectrum of people who just haven't responded to traditional treatments.
That's amazing, and that's something that a lot of our veterans are looking into. A lot of people are trying to move away from the overuse of medication, over prescription of medication for anxiety and depression specifically. And while a lot of people still need to do work in regards to maintaining therapy and
Yeah.
choosing not to utilize or overutilize alcohol, um, there is still a drive to try to explore new modalities, and that's great. Um, but when it comes to ketamine, I know there's a protocol for chronic pain. What is the protocol for treating depression and mental health issues with ketamine? Because that's the one thing that a lot of people don't understand. It's not just going in and be like, oh, I'm just going to take some ketamine, I'm good. There's a difference in the protocol if I'm remembering correctly.
There is. And, it's still an open book. More trials and studies are needed. But to answer your question, the current protocol for intranasal, it's a nasal spray, S-ketamine therapy is a delivery of the medication in a monitored setting. So that, for example, in my office, I'm qualified and I have been authorized to do it. And you give a nasal spray, one spray in each side, and then you're monitored for 2 hours. You do that 2 times a week for a month, so twice weekly for a month. Of course, after each session and intermittently, your provider is going to be talking to you, seeing how you're doing. You can adjust the dose a little bit if needed. If the patient responds well, they'll continue the treatment once a month for another 3 to 6 months. And then in some cases, patients might continue for a year or more It's individualized. Also, these patients typically, if they were on an antidepressant, they will continue that. It could be even one or more, or even change their oral
Mhm.
antidepressant. So you can continue that while you add on the ketamine therapy. Why does it work? We don't fully understand this, but there's some really good data on perhaps answering the why. And that seems to be that the traditional antidepressants, which there are many, common categories would be the SSRIs,
Yep.
norepinephrine, and dopamine reuptake inhibitors. These medications worked on a set of um, transmitters, excuse me, uh, and those neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin only hit certain pathways within the brain. And there's this void in the treatment of depression of hitting an important neurotransmitter, the most abundant neurotransmitter called glutamate. Glutamate is intensely upregulated by ketamine or esketamine. And glutamate seems to activate regions of the brain without going into too much of science of the science behind it, but it seems to activate regions of the brain that are extremely important in helping someone reconnect with memories, perceptions, and their feelings about the world in a meaningful way that allows that person to develop new wires, new connections, new freeways. I'm using some analogies here to those parts of their brain that allows them to repair and um, form new memories, thought processes, and emotions about these events in their life. So, repair and form new memories, thought processes, and emotions about these things in their life that have been harmful, damaging, and keeping that person stuck in a certain place. And so there's different ways of describing it, but that's how I would describe it: new roadmaps and wires. And you can imagine when you have a trauma in your life and it has kept you stuck in this place and unable to move beyond that. If you can find a way around it, a detour, right? A new roadmap to recreate that connection, that part of your brain that might allow you to see it or feel it in a different way, then you can potentially heal, and not just temporarily. And that's why the treatment, it is important that the treatment continues, because it takes time for these new connections to form. But that's the concept. The term, the medical term or scientific term that's being used is called neuroplasticity. And you can look that up and read about it a little bit. But that's the concept that we're thinking that some of these treatments like esketamine may provide.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating to read up on neuroplasticity because for a long time we thought, oh, the brain's formed at this point in your life, it's going to stay the same way, no hope in changing it. And
Yep.
a lot of people are still under that assumption that it's like, whatever, I can't do anything to change it. It's like, no, no, no. There's a lot of stuff to read. There's a lot of things you can do, and it's breaking that repetitive cycle, that damned cycle of thinking circularly about the same things over and over again, going to the same behaviors. Like, be willing to
Yes.
stop and research and be willing to take an active role in your own recovery. So many of us forget that for a vast amount of our lives, we were hard charging, determined individuals willing to do whatever it takes to achieve the mission. Now you're on the other side. Now you're trying desperately to make things right. You're trying to keep your marriage afloat. You're trying to be a good father. You're trying to maintain your job. And you just keep taking the same medication. You just keep doing the same things. You keep drinking every Friday night, every Saturday night. It's like, well, it's time to crack open that 6 pack, 12 pack, drink hard alcohol on the weekend, sober up, go to work. You still do the same thing. Or maybe you have a few positive things. What if we stopped? What if you take back control of your life and you do the research and you look into things like alcohol use and you realize that there's no amount of alcohol that's actually beneficial for you. And you realize, like, okay, maybe I'm not going to go 100% sober, clean and sober. I'm not going to stop drinking, but maybe I will throttle back and make it 2 nights that I'll drink 1 or 2 drinks. That's a step towards the right direction. Maybe you'll do some research into medications that you're taking and you'll realize, SSRIs, Ativan, Xanax, Prozac, all these things. I probably shouldn't be doing them while I'm drinking or doing all these crazy things. Like maybe that's another thing I got to look into. Maybe I'll cut that back. Maybe I'll go talk to my doctors and ask for a step down from this medication because I just did some research and found out that they got me on 15 pills and 10 of them counteract what the other ones do. And it's like, but we're not willing to do that. We're not willing to take some time and go back into that mentality of being that driven professional that says, I'm going to take control of my life. I'm going to take control of my health and be an active participant and talk and engage with my doctors. I didn't want to do that. Me and like three of my closest best friends, when we used to walk into a doctor's office, we just say, nope, nothing's wrong. Nope. Yep. Same meds. Okay. Bye. Why? Why are we willing to do that? Stop. A doctor's a human being. A doctor is able to sit down and say, okay, this is what my patient's saying they're experiencing. Okay, let's take a look at it. Let's figure out what's going on. We need to get over the fear. We need to get over the fear and start asking questions and being that amateur scientist and being willing to set up that appointment and bring in the white papers and say, hey, I just realized this stuff's not really good. And I have a pre-existing condition that kind of like that's aggravated by taking all this stuff. Can you help me? Of course, let's take a look at it. It sounds
Yes.
easy. It sounds so easy, but man, it's a little difficult. It's a little challenging because again, it takes us sitting down and taking ownership of our lives and being willing to say, you know what? I want to live better. I want to live a better life. I want to be here for grandkids. I want to be here for the big moments in life. I don't want to just check out. I don't want to be an autopilot.
Yeah, and to your point, it's so many things. It's not one thing, it's not one drug that's going to be the solution. It's just a multitude of blocks that stack up on each other to get over that fence. And from a physician's standpoint, a doctor's approach to treating people, what's been so frustrating is that there's just only so many tools in the tool bag and limited time, and to spend with these patients and understand what's going on, and have something new to offer. And so, this isn't the key or the gateway to heaven, but it's at least another tool in the tool bag that's shown some meaningful um, data and outcomes on it. And uh, it gives us another approach. It's also helping us dive deeper into the science of understanding the brain, because the brain is the last frontier as far as medicine goes.
Yeah.
It is just the most poorly understood organ system, because it's so complex, and we'll probably never get there. But it's like the universe. We're
Yeah.
going to understand bits and pieces of it. We'll probably never fully understand the intricate workings of the human brain. But obviously, it's the motherboard of this ship, this
Yep.
this vessel, our bodies, and we only got one of them to get through this life. So I think it's great that we're making some strides in understanding it, and how to help people in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I do want to ask your advice since you are a actual doctor. Before I let you go, if you had to look back and give a top 10 list of things that every veteran should be doing to enhance their well-being, what are some of the things that you recommend right now?
Yeah, some of them we've touched on. So to recap a few of those, I would say get your heart and mind balanced, and that's easily said, very difficult to do, but heart and mind balanced. And more specifically, what I'll mean by that is first fitness. That's integral in the military, so not difficult for most people, but maintaining that not only in the military but for rest of your life, that physical fitness, because you got to prepare this body, this vessel, to get through life. Mind balance, for me, that's my faith. I know that's a little bit different for everybody, but whatever that means for you, find it, use it. Some of the toughest military commanders and Marine Corps officers, one in particular that I remember when we were in the thick of it, we were having a conversation. He said, "Hey, man, the Marines who have their faith, for him and I, it was our Christian faith. He said they just do better coming into this craziness. He knew those that had that. He just said, man, they just do better." So that stuck with me. And I've carried that with me from then. And you want to keep that with you for your whole life because it's easy to lose it, to lose faith, trust, even have arguments with your God, with your faith. I had them for sure, doubts and man, pissed off at times, but keep coming back to it because he won't fail you. And then I'd say at some point, and again, this is different for everybody, but grab a fistful of courage and just go after that thing that you've maybe been holding out on or delaying in your life. That could be while you're in the military or afterwards, and take a chance. Maybe it's the girl, maybe it's the job, maybe it's uh, going away from a life that you've always known that you're comfortable with, and saying, all right, this is scary, but I'm going to go outside my comfort zone. Maybe it's a relationship you're in that you should have ended a long time ago, or a relationship that you should have repaired a long time ago. Take a chance. Who cares if you fail? You'll just get up and take a new approach. I guess those would be my top five. That might not have been 10, but those are my top five.
That's good enough.
Oh, I got one more. Whoever that person is in your life, your spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. If they're the person that, if they're your soulmate, your life partner, or you don't know it, figure it out and involve them as much as you can in every step of the way. I guess I say this because I grew up in maybe an environment in my family environment where maybe the wives are kept on the side a little bit. Like, we're guys and we do guy stuff. I'm not going to talk with them about some of these things and be as emotionally involved. Screw all that. Have that person emotionally involved in your life, invest in your life, because they're going to appreciate it and they're going to be able to love you, and you're going to be able to love them the best when you involve them to those deepest levels.
Yep. Absolutely. Doc, I can't thank you enough for being here today. This amazing book. It truly is something I enjoy reading, these accounts from our last 20 years of combat. Um, the way that we're going to be able to ensure that our warrior legacy is kept and maintained is not just the oral history, but being able to read these stories, these accounts. Um, when we're young, it doesn't seem that important, but now, as an
Yeah.
older, wiser man myself, I realize the importance of these stories, and I am grateful for individuals such as yourself that are willing to pour their time and effort into these books that are so well written, that will not only inspire the next generation of men to pick up and go and dare greatly uh, when their nation calls upon them, but maybe they help reflect our next generation reflect on the cost of combat, of war, and it can inevitably help us steer away from that. But if not, at least we know we can motivate and inspire others to do great things. So, Doc, thank you so much for being here today. It was an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, Denny. And hey, if I can ask you, I like to ask this question in the book. What part did you like the best? And it could be the pre-Iraq stuff, or in the thick of it, or afterwards. What spoke to you in the book as far as what you enjoyed
I
the
like
best?
getting the insight of who you were prior and being
Yeah.
able to learn that. Um, that's the American experience that I truly want to be able to reflect on and look at that through every individual, because my life's different, completely different.
Hmm.
But the connections and reading and seeing, like, oh wow, like we're not that different. In every one of these books and every one of these authors that I've been privileged to talk to and connect with, we're not that different. We're not. We might have come. You might not have grown up in Panama for a bit of your life, but there is a connection that all of us who have been to combat have, in just the way we grew up and the way that we were ultimately brought into this life. And that's the thing that I wanted to find, that connecting point. I found it with Rick Prado's book, and I am privileged and happy to have seen it again in your book.
Love that, the human element.
Yeah.
And I like asking that question because it helps me, when I'm writing it, to understand how to put something on paper that's going to draw someone in into
Yeah.
as to who you are. And that, anyways, that was one of the most challenging things. Is, hey, I can write all this fancy stuff about medicine and combat medicine and things like that, but really, they got to know who I am first before they're going to give a rip about all that. So thanks for that
Yeah.
insight.
Absolutely. That to have known and been able to known you through your words and then meet you is a perfect way of doing these interviews, I believe.
Love it. Well, hey, Denny, thanks for what you do. I appreciate it. It's guys like you are keeping the torch burning. So well done. And perhaps we'll follow up here down the road when I have some more patients under my belt going through treatment, because we just started this journey. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Absolutely. I would love that. And yeah, again, the name of the book is Code Red Fallujah, Donnelly Wilkes, MD, doctor's memoir at war. Get it everywhere you can. And if you head over to our website, you'll see it'll be highlighted on there on the resources and books to get. And just click the link. Until next time, take care, everyone.